Mr. President, as we wrap up, we're about to wrap up, I should say, our legislative work for 2025, I would say it's been quite a busy year here in the United States Senate. The longest session period in 15 years to kick off the year, and historic number of votes, the most literally in half a century. In fact, Mr. President, if you can see on this chart, the number of votes, you go back, the first date on there is 1989. Obviously, this is pretty small, difficult to see, perhaps, unless you're standing right over it. But if you look at the red line here, that's this year. So 653 votes cast so far this year, which dwarfs any year going back to 1989, which is what we had data going back to. We have since researched farther back. Turns out there was one year, 1976. We went back 8 decades. There was one year in 1976 where the Senate cast more votes than we did this year. But if you go back to 1989, the closest one is right here in 1995, which for those of us who were actually following it back then, that was the Contract with America year, and so that was a record number of votes cast in both, I think, the House and the Senate. But we have eclipsed that. There were 613 votes cast in 1995. This year in the United States Senate, we have already cast 653, and we are not quite done yet. So historic, just in terms of the number of votes cast, the number of hours in session, and the number of days in session. Also historic just in terms of the amount of time that we've been around here, Mr. President. So we put in a lot of time here this year. Now, I have always said that you can't equate volume of activity or busyness with productivity. I think you have to, those are sometimes separate metrics. But I would argue, Mr. President, that what really matters here is not the number of votes or the number of hours that we've worked. It is what we accomplished with those hours. And this has been an incredibly productive Senate, and I'm proud to say that we've accomplished a lot this year in the United States Senate. Our flagship bill, I should say, for the year, of course, was the One Big Beautiful Bill, the Working Families Tax Cuts Act, and the largest part of that was, in fact, the tax cuts that were enacted that are going to benefit American families, Mr. President. Back in 2017, the Republicans delivered substantial tax relief for hardworking Americans. But that tax relief was scheduled to expire at the end of this month. And so one of our main priorities for this year was extending that tax relief. And extend it we did. But we didn't just extend it, we made it permanent. And we added to it additional tax relief on top. So now hardworking Americans can enjoy permanently lower rates, plus an increased standard deduction, a further increase in the child tax credit, a new bonus deduction for seniors, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and Mr. President, that list goes on and on. In addition to the new and permanent tax relief for individuals and families, we also made important tax relief for businesses of all sizes to help our growth and expand jobs and opportunities for American workers. So I would just say, again, Mr. President, if you look at that map, this measures, and again, it's too far away for people to see, but the color coding represents the amount of tax relief that people in these individual states or even within a state will receive based upon the filings and what we expect they'll be filing for next year. But if you can see at the top of that, the U.S. average is $3,752 in savings as a result of what we did to prevent what would have been the largest tax increase in American history. And so American families this next year, American businesses, are going to have more money in their pockets as a result of what we did. Had we not taken those actions, the average family across this country would have seen a $3,752 increase in their taxes. And so that's sort of representative of the chart across the country, and the darker ones means you're probably getting more tax relief relative to the lighter colors, but nevertheless, everyone in this country who files a tax return is going to see a much lower tax bill, tax liability this next year as a result of what we did. So that's a lot right there, Mr. President, in and of itself. But the One Big Beautiful Bill didn't end with the working families tax cuts. We also invested in a more secure border and safer streets. We made a historic investment in our national security, and we repealed the Democrats' natural gas tax and took steps to unleash American energy production to ensure that Americans have stable, plentiful, and affordable supply of energy. We took measures to modernize the farm safety net, something very important in my state of South Dakota, to address housing costs, to repair and upgrade our air traffic control system. Now, Mr. President, I could keep going. The working families tax cuts and the rest of the one big beautiful bill accomplished a lot for hardworking Americans. But that's not all that we've done in the Senate this year. The American people elected President Trump last November. And one of our priorities this year has been ensuring that the President has his team in place so that he can do the job the American people elected him to do. And I'm proud to report that by the end of this week, we will have confirmed 417 nominees, far more than were confirmed by this point in either President Trump's first term or in President Biden's term. And it's even more remarkable, Mr. President, again, you can see this in real form here. This was President Trump's first term in office. At the end of his first year, which would be end of 2017, there were 323 of his nominees that had been confirmed. Under President Biden, at the end of the first year, 2021, there were 365 of his nominees who had been confirmed by the United States Senate. And as of today, that number here in 2025, in President Trump's second term, will be 417 nominees. And that is important, Mr. President, because every president needs to have his team in place to do the job that the American people elected him to do. So as we think about, and we look at, discussed on the floor yesterday, you look at President's first term, what makes this even more remarkable is the fact that there was a historic level of obstruction by the Democrats to getting the President's nominees in place. I'm talking about something unlike anything we've ever seen in American history for any president of any political party. And if you look at his first term, Mr. President, President Trump remains the only president on record not to have had a single civilian nomination confirmed by unanimous consent or voice vote. The only president on record. Democrats have dragged out the process on almost every single one of the president's nominations. Not out of principle, but out of petty partisanship. Any president going back in history, Mr. President, when they get elected, get a mandate from the American people, generally both political parties, and I've been here through multiple administrations, both Republican and Democrat, and I've been here in multiple Congresses and Senates, both Republican and Democrat. And in every case, a lot of, particularly when you get past the cabinet, which we all take very seriously, obviously, and there is a process in place, and some of the changes that we made to expedite nominations didn't affect cabinet-level nominees. But when you get to the sub-cabinet level, in many cases, particularly non-controversial nominees have been approved by unanimous consent or voice vote. It is a way of recognizing that a president needs to get his team in place in order to accomplish the work and the agenda that the American people elected, in this case, President Trump to do. And so what happened this year was historic and unprecedented, because most of those lower-level cabinet nominees are done by unanimous consent. That's just been the practice, that has been the precedent, that has been the tradition, that has been the history of the United States Senate. And for President Trump, the first president in American history. But as I said, Mr. President, we as Republicans haven't let that stop us. And so when we close out this year with a total of 417 nominees, we will have the backlog of nominees essentially cleared. Mr. President, considering nominations is one responsibility of the government. Funding the government, together with the House of Representatives, is another. And one thing that I was determined on when I became leader was to make sure that the Senate went about considering the yearly appropriations bills through regular order, a process that gives senators from both parties the greatest chance to make their voices, and the voices of their constituents, I might add, heard. And we've done a lot to return the Senate to regular order process this year. Appropriations work was unnecessarily delayed by Democrats' decision to shut down the government for 6 weeks. But despite that, we've had multiple individual appropriations bills signed into law, and the Senate is well on its way to passing 5 additional bills. Now, Mr. President, there's a lot more I could talk about when it comes to Senate accomplishments in 2025. We've taken action to repeal a number of burdensome rules and regulations, including the Biden electric vehicle mandate, appliance rules that would have driven up prices for hardworking Americans and businesses, and energy mandates that would have driven up energy prices for American families. We passed the HALT Fentanyl Act to permanently schedule fentanyl analogs as the most deadly type of drugs. We passed the Lake and Riley Act to keep criminal illegal aliens off of our streets. We passed the Genius Act, a landmark bill to create the first U.S. federal framework for stablecoins and ensure U.S. leadership in financial innovation. We passed the Take It Down Act to combat non-consensual, explicit images being shared online. And Mr. President, so much more that I could talk about. And we even tried to do things that ultimately were blocked by Democrats, like legislation that would prevent biological males from hijacking opportunities for women and girls in sports. I guess my point, Mr. President, has been a long and a challenging year here in the United States Senate. And I thank all of my colleagues, both Republican and Democrat, and all the staffs, including the folks here on the floor, who put in long days and long hours in this last year. And I think, Mr. President, as I said, there is a lot to show for it. In fact, if I put up this last chart, you'll have a hard time. Nobody's going to be able to read this for sure, but I do this only simply to illustrate. This is the list of things that we have accomplished in this last year. And it runs the gamut from all the things, some of which I just mentioned, a lot of which I didn't mention, that were included in the working families tax cuts, the One Big Beautiful Bill that passed last summer, but then so many other things on this list that were accomplished as a result of the good work that we have done on behalf of the American people here in this last year. So, Mr. President, it is, I think, an example of what we all came here to do. And thanks to our work this year, Americans are going to be looking at 1, safer streets, 2, more money in their pockets, and 3, new opportunities to get ahead, and new opportunities on the way for American people and American families. And so, Mr. President, we're going to keep advancing those priorities here in the United States Senate in 2026 and build on the record of accomplishment and the successes that we have had here in 2025. Mr. President, I yield the floor, and I suggest the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.